A very good morning to you, distinguished guests, students, teachers. Thank you very much for joining me today and having me here today. My name is Divian Nair, and we're here today, of course, for HarmonyWorks Conference 2016, and we're talking about a subject, a common space, mind or matter. As we go along with the entire session or my plenary speech, I'm going to sort of define it and tell you why it's important to you and why it's relevant to the people that you care about the most. The angle that I'm taking today, a fundamental common space, is extremely important. I'm going to tell you why. But first, let me introduce myself. So, next slide, please. Okay, so I've been in the media line for the last 12 years. I've been on radio, I've directed films, I've been an actor. I'm also the CEO of a small agency in Singapore. Next slide, please. So I've had my fair share of experiences. I've hosted over 500, 600 shows, and all these things have made me who I am. Next slide. You might know Maroon 5. Anybody? No, yes. And Jason Mraz. Met quite a few interesting people. There's Dikosh there, and Adam Lambert. Of course, they're Wanted. I don't know if you still remember them. Next slide, please. Simple Plan, Demi Lovato, anyone? Anyone a fan of Demi Lovato? Next. And the most important people I've ever met, my parents. That's my mom and my dad. and of course you can tell I come from a mixed parentage family. My father is Indian and my mother is Chinese. But from the early get-go of my life, for all the experiences that made me who I am, my father and my mother were the first point at which I realized what a common space was. Because I couldn't differentiate. You see, I didn't see differences. I didn't see my father as an Indian man or my mother as a Chinese woman. I didn't see my grandparents on both sides as separate, nor my cousins or my relatives. All of them were my family. All of them were in a common space. And we learned, of course, to focus on the similarities and not the differences. Next. A common space. What is it and why do we need it? Now, a common space has to be first defined. What are we talking about here? What exactly is a common space? So let's go on to define it. Okay, the subject of today, mind and matter in a common space, comes from the word, of course, common. Let's start with that. It has an origin in Latin, and then it went on to Old French, and slowly it progressed to Proto-Germanic and then English. But it basically means to share. Why? Why is it that we find it necessary to share, to collaborate as a species, as human beings in general? Let me put it to you this way, and see if you agree with me. Way back when, in the evolution of our species, before we had societies, before we had civilizations, we started off more nomadic as one, okay? But imagine yourself as one human being. One human being, you'd have an infinite number of freedoms. You can do anything. You can run around in this entire lecture hall trying to catch your Pokemon, it doesn't matter. You can kick somebody in the backside, it doesn't matter, okay? None of it matters, but you cannot protect yourself as well as 1,000 people can. And so this idea of survivability, of surviving better in numbers, started to grow. But you see, the trick is to maintain a structure of 1,000 people all together so that all of our life expectancies increase together. We must compromise, we must collaborate, we must share, and we must find a common space or multiple common spaces. Now, what you see up here on this slide is me trying to separate mind and matter. When we talk about mind, we're talking about intangible things, things you cannot hold or grab. For example, with preferences, okay? You and I, we prefer chicken rice, right? Therefore, chicken rice, or the preference for chicken rice, is a common space. But when you transfer that to matter, and say a physical article, like food, like the chicken rice itself, that's also a common space. So the activity, the entire situation of both of us enjoying chicken rice involves both mind and matter. It's not an or. It's always going to be together. And so I've listed some of these things down in order of how fundamental they can get. Okay, so you've got preferences, you've got experiences, you both love the nature of a common movie or a book, values, things that you learn from your parents or you share with your friends, you love honest people, you like to be a person with integrity, and of course beliefs. And this is all on the side of mind. Physical locations like the HDB flats that we stay in, right? Events like the one that we're currently in, or perhaps even symbols, the badge that you wear, or the Singapore flag, for example. These are all physical points, tangible things that are matter, that are common spaces that we can share. But altogether, mind and matter has to come together. And that's the point. The other point I want to really make is, the more fundamental the common space is, the more basic it is, the more of us can share it. Because maybe you don't like chicken rice, maybe you like nasi lemak, right? But we can believe in the same thing. We can believe that we like Singapore food, Singaporean food. No place like home. Next slide, please. So why is it so important that all of us share a common space? Now, early on, I mentioned the point of survivability. We survive better together. Therefore, the people that you love the most have a better chance of survival if all of us work together. So I want you to consider this. And I'm not trying to scare you here. Next slide, please. But I want to tell you about how fragile our society is. Singapore's come a long way in the last 50 years. It's been a lot of hard work, a lot of chance, a lot of luck, a lot of good planning as well. But altogether, we have a brilliant economy. We do. We have a wonderful family. We rarely ever have problems that you see other countries have, like riots and so on and so forth internally. And we have one of the best examples of multiculturalism in the world. It currently stands as one of the best, but it is extremely delicate and it requires a lot of sensitivity. If you consider the global climate that we're in today, last year in 2015, we had an accumulation of 290 odd terror attacks. And I don't just mean from ISIS. I mean terror attacks as in people physically causing terror. Altogether 290. This year, from January to July, we've had 1,003, the last we checked. So you see that there's an increase, you see that there's a pattern. But this pattern is not anything new. In the course of history, there's always going to be struggle. There's always going to be hardship. There's always going to be conflict. What we have to understand is, just because we grew up in a space that's been safe for so long, doesn't mean it won't happen. Crisis is inevitable. Whether it happens next week, next year, the next 5 years, or the next 20 years, something will eventually happen. And if you put all these things together, the global climate, how fragile our society is, you will then understand why we really need to find something in common to hold on to each other, for ourselves and for the safety of our loved ones. I want to share a perspective with you. And it's a strange thing, you know, that human beings tend to separate themselves from their environment. Okay? It's a very interesting, because if I asked you where the universe was, right? I think a lot of you would point up to the sky and say, oh, the universe is out there, it's where the sun and the moon and the stars are, and so on and so forth. Maybe if you thought about it a little bit more, you might say, oh, the universe is actually all around us. But how many of you, honestly, how many of you will say that the universe is in you? Let me put it to you another way. From the start of time, okay, according to the Big Bang Theory, when all the elements were formed in the stars, none of these elements have ever been destroyed. None of the carbon atoms that make up 70% of your body have ever been destroyed. They've only ever been transferred from star to planet to galaxies to nebulas and all that thing. So every single one of you used to be a star. Do you know this? All of you are made of stardust. You literally are. Okay? And if that doesn't make you feel like the universe is not so much out there but in you, nothing will. But my point is, when you consider that this entire bubble is something we call the universe and you are within it, you cannot be excluded from it. And therefore you are the universe. Let's take this perspective slightly smaller, on a micro scale. Let's consider Singapore. So many of us consider Singapore as the roads we see outside, the buildings, the government, the flag, so many things that are outside of us, outside of our environment, when we don't realize that the most part of Singapore is you. It's each and every single one of you. Even if you're not born here, even if you just come here to study or you're on exchange, at this very point of time, you are part of the Singaporean fabric. Okay? And so you are, at this point of time, Singapore. Do you see what I mean? Okay? If you took all of us out, it would be an empty shell. There would be no Singapore at all. So now that we understand the perspective of who we are Singapore. We are this entire entity in its totality. Next slide, please. How do we then find a common space? So there's something very interesting about all things big and all things small. They're all related. You know, in every which way we look at it, they're all related because there's always a fundamental pattern that joins everything together. Take a look at this picture, really look at it, okay? You've got some of these curves on the shell of a nautilus, it's a shellfish, and then you've got the spirals of a galaxy the arms of a galaxy, there is a pattern. And it's no joke. They've calculated this pattern. It's called phi, P-H-I. And it's a specific ratio in which a spiral moves out. How is it that a pattern evident on a little nautilus crustacean shell is the same as what makes up the spirals of a galaxy? You see? There are patterns all over the place. From anything complex, next slide please. Like for example, complex computer systems. Systems that we depend our lives upon, right? Like a flight system if you're on a plane, the GPS, the games that you play, all of it in its entire complexity share one fundamental pattern in common. And that we know as binary. Okay, binary is a language. Are you aware of binary? Yes? Yeah, okay, fantastic. Binary is a very, very complex language, but the fundamentals of it are extremely simple. It is simply a 1 and a 0. That's it. A 1 and a 0 that has made all of this come together. So much of the digital age built upon layers and layers and layers and infinite complexities of 1 and 0, right? So what is the 1 and 0 to life? What is the 1 and 0 to us as Singaporeans? What is this fundamental 1 and 0 we can all share? That's what I'm trying to get at, a fundamental common space. Take a look at these quotes, okay? These are all amazing people. Our late Prime Minister, of course, Elon Musk, one of the visionaries of our time, Jordan J.K. Rowling. You take a look at this and you start to see that there is a pattern, okay? All of them move forward. All of them talk about surviving, about moving past obstacles. And they do it with a sense of resilience. And it's always there. It's a trait that a lot of successful people, smart people, fighters in sports, you know, athletes and so on and so forth, all of them share this basic 1 and 0, moving onward. I'll show you how it applies to some of the big brands as well. Next slide. Okay. Look at that. Just do it. It keeps going. Impossible is nothing. The power of dreams. You can literally put it in a sentence. If you believe in the power of dreams and you keep going and you just do it, impossible is nothing. You see? It all fits, right? Now, we know that the 1 and the 0 has everything to do, or one of the 1s and 0s, one of the fundamental patterns of life has to do with moving on, surviving. There is a word, and you can see it right there, it's Majulah. There is a word in our country that's on the back of every coin and every note. It's our national motto, the title of our national anthem, right? It's on buildings, it's on books. And it's been in our history for a very long time. However, we've never really expanded upon it. We've never really used it. We've never really believed in it. But it's there. It's always been there. Majulah. How many of you think it's a Malay word? Yeah? I see a couple of hands. Or what, like this kind of hands? Okay. Thank you. Majulah is not found in the Malay dictionary, but it is a Malay word. It is a Malay word. It's not in the Malay dictionary though. It stems from the root word maju, which means to advance, to progress. Okay? Majulah is a colloquial expression that's come together. You see, it's maju and la. La is very Singaporean, right? Majulah! Makanlah! No, majulah. Right? All together. We'll go. So it gives a very rousing, it's in totality, togetherness is what it means to me, anyway. The idea that Majulah is our national motto can express and contain so much. We can talk about it in terms of our economy progressing, always advancing, always moving forward, always trying to be a better person, more compassionate, or never saying die. I never say die. Majulah will move forward. It's a very, very strong concept that can fortify you as an individual. Imagine if you had this concept in your head, no matter what the challenges came like waves towards you, you would just stand firm. Majulah, I'll just move forward, compared to somebody who doesn't. And what about 2 people who share this belief? What about 5 people who share this belief? Would you and your family rather be in a country with people who share this belief or not? That's the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so there are 3 very important pillars to this word, Majulah. Ownership, compassion, and courage. Okay? We must understand, like I said earlier on, and if you agree with me, that we are Singapore. Okay? All of it. It's us. It's not somebody else's road, it's our road. Okay? We must learn to take ownership of this entire concept. Compassion, of course, the more we share, the more we collaborate. Courage in the way we defend each other, we speak out for each other, we say our minds, right? We have this funny penchant for being very quiet. It's an Asian thing, I understand. And it's got a lot to do with respect, with conferring respect as well. But don't ever let it cross the line where you don't stand up for what you think is right, what you believe. Because you must double check, right? But just to keep that in mind. So, enough about the talk. I mean, we can talk about this until the cows come home. How do we implement it? How do we combine mind, which is the concept of Majulah, to matter, something tangible, something we can actually do, as a fundamental common space, a 1 and a 0 we can all share. The first initiative that we've kind of started, we were only about 4 months old, is this idea that it's called We Never Say Die. It's a very simple idea. Simple because we believe that fundamental means it will translate easier. The second reason, which is the more likely reason, is we have no money. So it's easier for us to just print stickers and put it up. But the idea is very simple. The idea is you paste the Majulah logo, okay, and in togetherness, we share the 1 and the 0. We say all together, we never say die, no matter what. But as we progressed, we evolved this initiative to something a little bit more interesting. The Majulah Shield, okay? Now what we're going to do is, we're going to have and ask people who believe in the same thing to display the Majulah Shield for 1 and 2 reasons. The first reason is this. When you put up the shield, what you tell somebody is, I am willing to help you, no matter what, okay? I will afford any bit of help I can. A phone call, a little glass of water, you sprain your leg, you come into my store because you see the Majulah Shield, I'm willing to offer you this amount. If you see it on the car decal or the phone, you can start to see how this will create a more reassuring society. Everywhere you go, you see the Majulah Shield. You see people displaying, telling each other all the time, I'll be there for you, don't worry. The second reason is that we're all in this together. Okay, it's a more fundamental, more basic reason. And by the way, can I just add that the idea of the lion, of the word Majulah, it only means to represent that 1 and the 0, the spirit. Because the word in itself, the symbol in itself is just a sign. Okay, if I say my handphone, for example, or this watch is WATCH, okay? WATCH is not equivalent to this watch. If I call this watch an apple, it doesn't change the watch into an apple. It's still a watch. You understand? So it's just a sign for whatever we want to represent it with. But I don't want to take too much of your time. I'm going to sort of close it off now with the idea of a common space, a fundamental common space. It is your responsibility to find it as well, even if it is not Majulah. And I'm saying, if it's not Majulah, if it's not this symbol that you see, whatever it is that makes you feel connected, that makes you feel as one thing, one environment, you must find it. You must find it. In closing, I'd just like to say that a common space is not just mind, is not just matter, but it is heart. And that's the only way we'll be one Singapore, one people. Thank you very much.